Okay, so again, beginning on Monday, the city will begin the process of accepting licenses for medical cannabis establishments. So let's talk a little bit about the process behind that and how we got to where we are today.
Carla, you want to take the lead on the licensing?
Sure. Well, the city council, this has been months in process, I'm sure, as most of you know. The city council and city staff knew this was coming when it passed, I don't know, months ago, whenever that was.
Months.
And so we decided that we wanted to exercise the authority to license establishments in our boundaries. Medical cannabis is a big thing that's happening with cardholders and establishments. What the city can do is look at time, place, manner, and location. So we decided to put into place a licensing scheme for businesses that want to operate within the city. So the licensing, all of the different kinds of establishments, which are, people are focusing on dispensaries, and that's an important one, but also it's testing facilities, grow operations or cultivation operations, and manufacturing. So all of those will be allowed in the city limits. Dispensaries will be limited to 15 within the city limits. And so next week, licensing applications will open, so people will start the process to get a city license. We'll issue provisional licenses at this phase. Then they'll need to go to the state, get a state certificate, and then the ones that are selected at that point come back here and can start to operate. So that process is really starting next week. We've been spending months getting ready for it.
And then Monday night at council, they will have second reading of the zoning ordinance that identifies what district each of these uses are allowed in, whether they're permitted, conditional, and also identifies where they're not allowed. For those that are permitted, we will be issuing provisional zoning letters, potentially starting Monday. We cannot issue the full letter until a couple things happen. One, the ordinance becomes effective, which once city council minutes are published, 20 days later, the ordinance is actually effective. There will be instances where someone submits for these uses and we identify that it's conditional. Before we can provide that provisional zoning letter, we must have the Planning Commission act on that conditional use permit. Once that is done, we will provide that to the applicant to then submit to finance, which is a part of that provisional application for the licensing part of it. Regardless whether you need a conditional use permit or it's permitted, the checklist of materials for a medical cannabis establishment must be submitted for staff's review to ensure that if this is a site that's going to be considered for licensing, that the parking, the setbacks, the lot coverage, the on-site stormwater quality, etc., that it's all being addressed. What we don't want to have happen is unrealistically have a property that just doesn't fit. It's too small. There is no parking per se, and then they're out there vying for one of these licenses, but they're never going to get the building permit because they don't meet the other land area regulations. So I think it's just working together as a team between finance and planning, as well as the public, to ensure that those that are going to go on to the state for consideration, especially again the dispensaries, that they can in fact pull that building permit at the end of the day.
Now, I was going to say there was an emergency notation on the ordinance regarding the licensing. I guess I just wanted to ask the significance of that. Why the emergency notation to get the ball rolling a little bit quicker on that one?
Well, that was primarily to make sure that our ordinance was effective in conjunction with the state's rules being effective. Normally, unless we have that notation that it becomes effective upon publication, which is sometimes called an emergency provision, normally our ordinance would be effective 20 days after publication, which would put us out in the middle of October. We didn't want to wait that long because the state's rules are in place starting, I believe, Sunday. And so this just gave us some flexibility to have the rules, our rules, go into place exactly when we wanted, which was really we're going to publish on Saturday, but Monday's the first business day that they're effective. So that's why we did it that way.
With it being such a complex process, as you have said, it's not likely that we're going to be seeing medical marijuana establishments opening within 2 weeks, for example, right? So talk a little bit about maybe the length of time that we are expecting to see before we see medical cannabis establishments within the city limits.
I think in addressing the city's part of it, we will take those provisional requests for zoning compliance. We will take up to 5 working days to get those back out to the applicants. If it is identified that it needs a conditional use permit, the very soonest that those could go before the Planning Commission would be the first meeting in November, which I believe is November 4th. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. And then 1 week later would be the appeal time for that, so November 11th?
Correct.
Thank you for doing my math for me. We could then issue that provisional zoning. Once that is done and they've gotten their background checks and they've gotten that checklist of information on a flash drive, all of that needs to be put together and presented to finance. Once that is complete, and we could be looking at between 45 to 60 days to get all of that done. Some applications won't be complete. We'll work with them to ensure that they are. Some may miss that first meeting in November because they're not complete, and it'll be another 2 weeks before we have another Planning Commission meeting. But then it gets turned over to the state when they submit for that registration. And at this time, I don't believe, Carla, that we know exactly how long that's going to be before they pull licenses.
The state has 90 days to, once they get a complete application, they have 90 days to issue or deny the license. And for dispensaries, which have a limit, and we're anticipating more than 15 applications, but I can't tell the future, but probably, they'll have a random drawing at some point, and that's kind of up to the state. But they have a large window. They've given themselves a large window to issue the licenses on the state side. And so then once they get a license at the state, they come back to here and get an annual license, and then they really have a year to operate. I think we heard during the council meetings, and I think this has been our research as well, is that what we sell here, or what businesses sell here, has to be grown here, and that's a process that takes some time to get going. So you're right, we won't have dispensaries selling South Dakota grown medical cannabis in 2 weeks. We might not have it in 6 months, but we could. I think the procedures are in place to get it here as soon as we can.
And it's important to note that once you get everything finalized from the licensing part of it, you still have to come back to the city and get a building permit. Whether you're utilizing an existing structure or you're building a new structure, it still requires a building permit, and we do turn those around in about 7 calendar days.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The dispensaries are limited, but for facilities that do testing, growing, manufacturing, those are not limited?
We didn't put any limits on at this point. That's something that the council could take up in the future, but as of today, there aren't any numerical limits on those businesses.
Okay. And in regards to the permitting process, who can apply for these? Is it just in-state? Is it out of state? Who can apply for some of these dispensary permits?
The state law requires that they have to have at least one owner that's a resident of South Dakota. So they might have all owners that are residents of South Dakota. We anticipate receiving a variety of applications. That's the, we didn't impose a residency requirement. That's beyond what the state imposed.
And with our preliminary kind of conversations we've had with people calling and emailing, we've had everything from mom and pop down the street who own a corner store kind of thing to big corporations that are also interested in licensing. So it's all across the board as far as who we've seen interest from. We obviously don't know who will apply, but.
In that lottery process, that is completely handled by the state, so there's no way to know, there's no preference given to local versus big, anything like that?
Remember, someone from South Dakota will need to be one of the stakeholders in that license. And once that is met, then again, their tie-breaking procedure, I would assume that it'll be more random than looking at particulars, maybe somewhat of a lottery.
Okay, but could someone say, like I mentioned this to Daryl, like flood the process and submit like 100 applications and go up against someone maybe submitting one to get multiple permits?
That's a risk. That's a possibility, and that's happened in other states too, that people submit multiple applications. Just, that's the chances of a lottery. And so that we'll have to see how that really manifests. I think 100 is a lot, because you would need a separate location for all of those. So we're going to take one application per location. So that's going to have a limit somewhat on how many you can submit. But I think, it's a little bit hard for us to predict what's going to happen, considering that we've not done this before, but I think that is a risk.
And I have had contact with some that were going to bring in many, many applications, but as they've looked at the steps and they see what's required even to be considered, they're now down to 2 sites. So reality is setting in that it is extensive what you have to bring in to ensure that you get a chance at being pulled for one of those licenses for a dispensary. And it is going to be time consuming, and it's going to require some documentation to confirm that the site will work. And in doing so, I think that it will limit some just from that. It's just not a matter of filling out paperwork. Those that are looking at new development on new property, they're having an engineer join them. They're having an architect join the team. And getting that done and being in the bunch that's going to go to the state, if you're just now looking, it's probably too late. It is important to note, we don't want people to think that it's first come, first get. That's not how this is going to work. So take your time, make sure your applications are complete. We will process ours in a timely manner. Everything then goes to the state, and the state will choose the 15. It's not the first 15.
So for those who are interested in establishing a medical cannabis business in Rapid City, effective Monday, what do folks need to know to get the application process going? Fees, anything that they need to show up whenever they come in on Monday, if that's when they choose to do it?
Starting Monday, they can access the license application. And then that will spell out that there's certain steps that they need to complete before they submit it. One of the first things they will do is check with our department, Community Development, to ensure that the use at that location is permitted or conditional or not allowed. And that's that provisional letter. That might take up to 45 days depending upon whether or not a conditional use permit is required. If it is permitted or conditional, at some point they are providing us with that checklist of information to ensure that the site works. They're also completing that background check. I don't know what fees are associated with that on a background check.
The $1,500, that's the application fee that will be submitted at the time of application, covers 10 background checks. If they'll need additional ones, I think they're $42 each past that. So that's the fees that we're going to be collecting when they submit their application. There's also, if you need a conditional use permit, it's also a $250 fee.
Some other miscellaneous fees for property owners lists and posting of signs, but those are minimal. In all told, looking at what other communities have chosen to place as the price tag on some of these applications and licenses, I think that Rapid City is being very realistic that we want this to be fair for everyone, not just those big companies, so that those ma and pa stores, as Kelly mentioned, this is something they can afford to attempt to do as well.
And I will note that on our website that we now have live, we do have a procedures and submittal requirements checklist. So it goes through everything, like what is step 1, what is step 2, all the way through the state process and then back to the city process. So I would highly recommend anyone who's interested to start there before. I mean, it lines it all up. Carla did a great job putting it together, and the whole team worked to make sure it was very concise and detailed on what people need to do.
And then Kelly also ensured that not only can you find the steps, but you can find the links to all of the different documents on there. Starting Monday, we will add the application for the licensing. That's being completed as we speak. But come Monday, when you check out our website and you click on that, you'll be able to access that information. And it's important to note that we're trying to set this up so that you can actually do everything electronically to begin with. You don't need to even come into to City Hall until you're ready to submit for your actual conditional use permit or the site review, where you need to bring in all the documentation showing parking, landscaping, signage, etc. But up until that point, there's a lot that you can do just by accessing our website. The documents there, you can interact with them right online and submit them back to us.
The applications for the license will need to go to the finance office. That's when you bring in the fee also. So those aren't allowed to be submitted electronically, but you'll have to go visit the finance office to do that.
As far as the funds that you guys collect from the applications, are all of them being used to process the applications, or will they be allocated elsewhere in the city to go towards other needs?
The fees, and one of the reasons why they are as low as they are, is we looked at what staff hours and cost it would be to process these applications, and that's where the dollar amount fell to. So that's a great question. They're not in excess. We would consider that unfair and somewhat of a tax, so we've just tried to keep it to what it does take to review these applications. And there is an extensive group that looks at these to ensure that everything is meeting the ordinances that have been passed or are being passed by the City Council.
The voters of South Dakota also voted to authorize recreational marijuana use in the state as well. No, it's tied up in state Supreme Court and those types of things. But the basis of the licensing procedure for medical use of cannabis, is the city prepared to also use that same criteria if and when it's determined that recreational cannabis use would be effective in the city as well?
I think once recreational marijuana, we know that that is legal and coming, we're going to need to look at what we've done and see if we need any adjustments. You know, we were kind of in a tricky position because this is really for medical cannabis, but we know that that is likely coming. It's not accurate to say that once that law changes, all of these medical cannabis establishments will automatically be legal to sell recreational marijuana. We're going to need to do some work to get there. But also, I think that we envision that this will be an overlap. I mean, that's what happened in other states that had medical cannabis that moved to recreational. Things just kind of transitioned to recreational, and probably that's how it would happen here too. So we're going to have to do some work when that happens, but we kept that in mind when we were drafting where they would be located, what kind of things that we cared about in terms of operating procedures. I mean, we really kept those in mind when we were thinking about what kind of zoning do we want to apply and what are the appropriate locations for these businesses, just, you know, anticipating the future and how they'll be dealt with in the future.
All action taken by council to date is specific to medical cannabis establishments. So if recreational cannabis is allowed in the state, we would need to go back and look at the language of the licensing ordinance as well as the land use ordinance. And Kelly, maybe you can share a little bit about some of our separation to land uses that we did try to consider anticipating recreational.
Sure. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out where dispensaries in particular would be appropriate, and we came up with kind of a plan where the dispensaries would be allowed in specific zoning districts, but then also we put a buffer on certain uses. So we have a 500-foot buffer on parks, residential zoning districts, churches, and daycares. And inside those 500-foot buffers, it's a conditional use no matter what. We're going to look closer at it. We're going to look at, you know, how far away are you? What's your signage going to look like? Are you going to have screening, fencing? Is there an elevation change? And then also by state law, we have to not allow any cannabis establishments, medical cannabis establishments, within 1,000 feet of a school.
The city has the authority to make concessions on the separation for all of those uses except school. The state says 1,000 feet. We do not have the authority to reduce that. And that is something that, you know, people are amazed when you go out 1,000 foot from a school, how much property that includes.
Do you guys have, do you guys have any checks in place, once these businesses are established to ensure that the quality is medical grade and that there's, like, everything's being done correctly?
We do. In terms of the specifics of what they're selling and the quality, like you mentioned, that is going to be highly regulated by the Department of Health. So the Department of Health has people who work there who are charged with supervising this. They have, you know, dozens of rules about what they're selling, what they can't sell, how it needs to be labeled. That is all up to the Department of Health. And so if businesses are not meeting those standards, that puts their license with the state at risk. It also puts their license with the city at risk. There are provisions, like with other businesses that the city licenses, if you're not operating it in compliance with our rules or state law, you are subject to suspension of your license or revocation, or possibly just not renewing it when it comes up for renewal. So we do have those mechanisms that we can use and the state can use to deal with businesses that are not operating as we need them to be.
From a complaint resolution process standpoint, for the general citizenry, if there is a concern related to odor or something along those lines, I've heard those concerns before. Is there a complaint resolution process that the city has in place where a citizen can come and say, hey, this business is doing such and such? Talk about if there is any process like that.
You'll see in the zoning ordinance that we specifically addressed odor to the extent that it's not allowed to be smelt beyond the property line of the parcel of which the use is being conducted. And that was on purpose, so that it grants the city the authority to put that property owner on notice that your odor control plan is not working. We would then work with them to remedy that, either fix the existing system or secure a new system. If they didn't, then whether it's a building permit to initiate the use or a conditional use, once they're in violation, we do have the grounds then to have them cease and desist the use until they remedy it. And that's true of any business right now within the city. If you're operating and we've got set rules in place and you're not operating in compliance with that, we always try to work with the property owners to bring them into compliance. But if not, then sometimes we just have to ask for a cease and desist.
So if one of the established 15, like hypothetically a year or two in the future, once all 15 are established, if one of them were to be ordered to cease and desist or were shut down for whatever reason, what would be the process of selecting the next one that could go into that one's place?
Well, the finance officer would provide notice to the public that there was an established or a dispensary license available. There'd be a window of time for people to apply, and we would take those applications and review them like we are now. And anyone that gets a provisional license could go to the state to get their certification, and likely they would do another drawing. So if that were to happen in the future, either by somebody giving up their license or losing their license, or if our population justifies an additional one, because our 15 limit is based on 1 per 5,000. So if we had population growth that would open up another license, that's the process that would occur.
Is there a deadline with the state for when they would hold this lottery, or any kind of deadlines in this process?
That's a good question, and one that we've heard from a lot of people. We are in frequent communication with the state to try to get some more clarity on that. But what I think it's safe to say that the state has an interest. They don't want to rush to the first 15 either. And they have a long window of 90 days where they get to review these applications. And So if we get any more clarity on any deadlines from the state, we will definitely let the public know. But I think it's safe to say that there is time for us to do our process and for the state to do their process, and for people who want to be in the lottery, if they have all of their documentation together, if there aren't any hiccups with their background checks or whatever, that they will be able to get in that lottery.
Okay, just the way that it's laid out with that you have so many days to respond, it almost seems like it's worked out as a first come, first serve.
No,
That way?
we do that on all our reviews. That's on staff, not on them. We just want to let the public know that we're not going to sit on these, that we're going to get it back to them, because again, they're compiling the steps together to get to the end. And so we don't want to take more time than absolutely necessary. And similar to, we just use the dates that we have for any other review. And we just inserted them and put it out there. But we hold ourselves to these deadlines for many different applications as well.
Yeah, good point. There are deadlines, not anybody
We
else's.
live in a world of deadlines.
Not just on this side, I'm talking about on like the state side with, you know, if I'm submitting now versus a month from now, and then they just kind of start stacking up at the state. But what if they don't get to that 15 and they reach that 90-day window?
Well, I think
Did I hear you say, what if they don't get to the 15?
I was I don't know.
I'm being funny.
I think we're going to be in close contact with the state all the way along. So if we know that we are getting way more applications than 15, I guess it doesn't matter if we get 16 or if we get 100. I mean, there's going to need to be a lottery probably. So, you know, we're going to let them know as soon as we know kind of the scope of our applications so that they can know and plan accordingly. You know, I think this is one that we're just going to have to go through it and see. And we've done as much planning as we possibly can, I feel like. But, you know, some of those things are just going to have to be answered as they come up.
We have no idea. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
We don't know how many
So it'll
applications
just
we're
be
going to
kind of
get.
adjusted.
We could get 50 on Monday. We could get 2. We could get 50 by the end of the week. We could get 4. I mean, we just have no idea.
And just talking with the people that have done this in other states and them being here in the community and interacting with those that may be interested in trying to offer assistance, their numbers seem to be coming down as to how many they think that we're going to get. So 35 to 50 seems to be where they're falling on. We'll see. We certainly will make that number available once we know what it is, so stay tuned.
And we are prepared to handle as many applications
Yep.
and requests we get. We're ready as we can be.
And our whole goal for Kelly really working hard on getting this website put together is so that the public can have every opportunity they can to bring in the correct information each and every time. Because there's just nothing worse than showing up and being told that you don't have what you need. And we wanted to ensure everyone equal and fair opportunity to know what it is that's going to be required, to have the time to secure it. And even if you can't get your request in on Monday or the following Monday, know that you do have time. It's better that you bring it in right than you bring in something incorrect, because incorrect will get suspended. It won't move forward.
There are handy maps on the website as well that show where preliminarily the dispensaries, testing locations, and or cultivation and manufacturing medical cannabis locations are allowed. So if you're curious on seeing whether your building is permitted or not, take a quick look. And then we have the provisional submittal of, the provisional zoning compliance would be the official. But if you want to just take a quick check, the maps are available as well.
And Kelly, too, maybe just clarify a little bit about the moment in time.
So these maps were produced on September 27th. So 3 days ago was the final update and export of them. So, I mean, they're correct as of that date. But if a daycare starts up today, it's not going to be on this map. So you may be within 500 feet of a daycare, even if it's not showing on these maps right now. And that's why we do a more in-depth review, which is the official review, rather than, just going on this one moment in time. Things change. Parcels get rezoned. somebody could open a church, so
Somebody could close a church.
somebody could close a church. Yep. So it is just one moment in time, just kind of a cursory glance. There were fun maps to make, so we did them. But for the official
Kelly
review,
did 'em.
you need to submit that request for the zoning letter of compliance, and that would be your step one. Is my location okay? And once you get that, then the rest of the procedure can start.
And it's also important to note that if someone does come in and go through all of this process and they secure the building permit, which is that's a home run when you have the building permit, and then a week later someone opens a church, that does not go against you. That doesn't change the approval that you've secured. When we're working with someone that wants to bring in one of these uses within 500 feet, we put them on notice of that and say, it is your choice to come into this area. They've been approved for this site, and proceed as you will, but they've been approved. And that seems to be working well. We have these same separations for establishments with on-sale liquor, and we've had to apply those same allowances, that if the on-sale liquor use is there first, and then a daycare shows up a year later, and then the on-sale needs to renew that license or wants to expand, they were there first.
We have time for maybe one or two more questions.
Can we ask them? How many licenses do you think we're gonna get? You're out there talking with the peeps. How many do you think?
I actually have no idea.
Come on, no, gotta give a number.
I would guess at least 15.
50, yeah,
At least.
yeah.
Based on, turning it back around, based on how many locations are available, how many could the city receive?
Many, many, many.
I mean, there's probably over 1,000, I'm gonna guess, just by cursory glance here, of parcels that would hypothetically be either permitted or have a conditional use on them. Now, I mean, obviously, we're not gonna have 1,000 dispensaries, but
No more than 15.
but yeah, I think we did a good job of making locations reasonable. There's a lot of green on this map, and green is permitted. Yellow is conditional, so there's potentially a lot of places. The amount of phone calls and emails that we've received over the last 3 weeks to a month, when we kind of started really gearing up, it's intensely a lot. Like, we've had a lot of interest. Now, whether that's going to move forward or not, whether, we have everything from people that are like completely ready to go, know all the rules because they've worked in other states, to just people calling saying, hey, how do I get a weed license? Like, and it's all the way through the ranks. So we have no idea.
I have one more question if y'all don't.
Go ahead.
Can you just talk about how you feel about this process that you're presenting now to the public?
Well, I think that it's been a great team effort amongst many different departments to try to provide solid, factual, clear information to give everyone, the small potential business owner to the large corporations, the same opportunity to pursue this. And we certainly acknowledge that the voters of South Dakota are in support of medical cannabis. We approached writing our zoning ordinance with that going forward, and I think the council was very generous in granting the 15 locations based on what we've seen other municipalities do. I feel good. I think that Rapid City has taken a very fair and just position on this, so that everyone has an opportunity to be considered. And just knowing that there's been extreme effort on the part of staff to make sure that the information is out there sooner than later, so that everyone also has the same fair and equal opportunity to get those applications in. I feel good. I've been with the city for 26 years. This is probably the most prepared I have ever seen us going into an ordinance amendment becoming effective.